Howdy, everybody. Dr. Andy Woods here, pastor, teacher here at Sugarland Bible Church. I want to welcome you to Pastor's Point of View number 387. This is being released December the 19th, 2025. We have a prophecy update for you today. If you look at our preview slide, here are the three things that we're going to look at: anti-Semitism, the world versus Israel, and I want to bring you up to speed on some issues related to the encroaching Gog-Magog alignment. Let's just jump right in and talk about the subject that I think is on everybody's mind: the explosion and growth of anti-Semitism throughout the world, and in particular here in the United States of America. We know from this particular graphic, Revelation 12, really trying to depict verses 6 through 17, that anti-Semitism, or the irrational hatred of the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, will explode. It will go off the charts as we get closer to the second advent. And of course, that's the great prophecy about the dragon in the end times being cast out of heaven, and he pursues the woman representing the nation of Israel, seeking to destroy her prematurely so that the kingdom can never come, because God arranged things for the kingdom to come into the world through the nation of Israel. And what better way to stop that from happening, Satan says, than to gobble up Israel prematurely before that prophecy can be fulfilled or realized. So anti-Semitism, based on that passage and other passages, I would expect to increase, not decrease, as we get closer to the end of the age. And as anti-Semitism is increasing, you can use that as sort of a barometer, if you will, to ascertain how close we are to the end time scenario being fulfilled. So with all of that being said, notice this initial article from the Geller Report. This is very recent, December 14th, 2025, and it's entitled "Two Dead." Brown University gunmen targeted Jewish class and allegedly shouted in Arabic, and police and media refused to deny or confirm. And this has to do with the recent shooting about a week ago at Brown University. You kind of get the idea that we're not being told all the facts about that. Certain facts are being suppressed, and this article explains what it is we're not being told. The article says reports and eyewitness accounts circulating since the Brown shooting claim the attacker shouted "Allahu Akbar" before opening fire. Now, Allahu Akbar means Allah is the greatest. So Islam has no intention of coexisting with those in the West, consistent fundamentalist Islam. It strives for hegemony, supremacy. That's what that phrase means. The article says police have not yet publicly confirmed the words, and most major outlets are using vague language like he shouted something. They have a suspect, and Lord knows how much video footage from CCTV, but the only thing they shared is a grainy short clip of a killer from the back. The shooting occurred in the classroom, listen to this, of Professor Rachel Friedberg, or maybe you pronounce that Friedberg, who is Jewish and part of the program in Judaic Studies, and whose research focuses on the intersection of economics and Jewish studies. The classroom was specifically targeted. No other classrooms were targeted. Most of the students were Jewish and observed the Sabbath, which is why they did not have their phones. A gunman opened fire with a handgun at Brown University late Saturday night, triggering a rapid police response and sending students fleeing as chaos erupted on campus just before the night of Hanukkah. So these are all pieces of information that really are not brought out into the open. This was an attack on a Jewish professor, Jewish Studies professor, Jewish students, on the eve of hours before it says Hanukkah, one of the great festivals and holidays within Judaism. And then there is a witness, it looks like, more than one eyewitness who says this person shouted, Allahu Akbar. Allah is the greatest. So you put all of this together, and this doesn't look like a random shooting, doesn't it? Does it? This looks like a targeted anti-Semitic attack, the very kind of thing that God's word says would escalate as we get closer to the end of the age. And almost concurrently and simultaneously with those happenstances, something was taking place in Australia. And notice this article from the Sydney Morning Herald. The title of this, December 15th, 2025, it's entitled, "You Let the Disease Spread. Netanyahu accuses Albanese of failing to curb anti-Semitism." And again, here's what the article says. It says, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has lashed out at Australia's leader over the mass shooting at Sydney's Bondi Beach, saying he had warned the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, that your call for a Palestinian state pours fuel on the anti-Semitic fire, close quote. And isn't it interesting that when Australia called for this two-state solution or jumped on board with it and started arguing for a Palestinian state, you notice that this didn't appease the Islamic and anti-Semitic elements within Australia. It emboldened them, and that needs to be understood. You can't play patty cake with an antichrist spirit, which is what Islam is, with a political conquest ideology, which is what Islam is, and expect it to sort of, be pacified. When you cave into it, essentially what it does is it whets its appetite for more. It emboldens it through a spirit of triumphalism. And that's what Netanyahu is pointing out here. Sunday marked the first evening of Hanukkah, the Jewish holiday, and the shooters were seen near the Hanukkah by the Sea festival, where Jewish, those that were part of the Sydney geographical area had gathered to celebrate. Boy, this kind of looks familiar, doesn't it? Let's attack a bunch of Jews as they're engaged in a festival. Isn't that what happened October 7th? A music festival, October 7th, 2023. And it seems like these attacks are targeted at Jews when they're, sort of have their guard down and they're more in a festive mindset. I'm seeing a pattern here. Netanyahu is quoted in the article as saying, "You did nothing to curb the cancer cells that were growing inside your country. You took no action," Netanyahu said during a government meeting on Sunday. "You let the disease spread, and the results of the horrific attacks on the Jews is what you saw today." Albanese said on August 11th that Australia would recognize a Palestinian state at the September's UN General Assembly, a move that followed similar announcements by France, Britain, and Canada. Netanyahu being quoted again, "I wrote, your call for a Palestinian state pours fuel on the anti-Semitic fire." Listen to this. "It rewards Hamas terrorists. It emboldens those who menace the Australian Jews, and it encourages Jew hatred now stalking your streets," close quote, Netanyahu said in a speech. "They're not only trying to annihilate us," Netanyahu said, they attack us because they attack the West in Syria. "We saw yesterday," Netanyahu says, 2 American soldiers killed and 1 American interpreter killed as well. Killed because they represent our common culture." Close quote. So these forces are at war not just with Judaism, they're at war with the West as well, with the United States of America coming from a Judeo-Christian heritage, the nation of Israel, a Jewish state. And of course, this is everything that Satan hates. Satan, in his sick, distorted, twisted mind, thinks he can stop the coming of the kingdom through the eradication of the Jews. That's what Revelation 12 is talking about. And so we're expecting anti-Semitism to increase as we get closer and closer to the end of the age. It is interesting to me that Australia made a decision sometime back to ban the ability to carry firearms. And you wonder how things could have been mitigated further, and there was a hero that jumped in and stopped this, but how even more lives could have been saved if the Jews had been given the decree to fight back, as they were given in the book of Esther, as they did successfully during the days of Nehemiah, when they rebuilt the walls around the city of Jerusalem. Study those two books in the post-exilic period, Nehemiah and the book of Esther, and you'll see very clearly that one of the ways God allowed his people to succeed is they were armed and had the ability to fight back, something that the Australian government has denied. Both of these attacks that I'm describing came during Hanukkah, which is not a Levitical feast. It was later added to the Jewish calendar festival system along with Purim, and essentially it commemorates the liberation and rededication of the temple during the intertestamental period. It was a miracle, and it was a miraculous burning of the menorah, which only had oil for, I think, one day. It miraculously burned 8 days. And they had to burn the menorah to reconsecrate, rededicate the second temple after it being subjugated under the wicked reign of Antiochus Epiphanes. So Hanukkah revolves around that day. Yeshua himself, Jesus, in John 10, verse 22, you'll find him in the New Testament as a devout Jew, celebrating Hanukkah, sometimes called the Feast of Dedication. And so it's interesting that these attacks are, to me, very planned and orchestrated to humiliate the Jews during a time in their calendar, which is supposed to be a time of celebration and commemoration. So this has the earmarks of Satan all over it. These are targeted, demonic, satanic attacks, and we can expect these things to increase as we get closer to the end of the age. Let's go to our second bullet point here, the world against Israel. The entire world, including the right, including the United States of America, will turn against Israel in the last days. Why do I think that? Notice Zechariah 12 and verse 3. Zechariah makes a prediction here about Jerusalem and says all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it. And then over in Zechariah 14, verse 2, he, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, predicts basically the same thing. I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem. So every nation will turn against Israel in general and Jerusalem in particular in the last days. And so another kind of signpost that we're nearing the end of the age is not only a rebirth politically of the nation of Israel in unbelief, which we've seen in our general lifespan and lifetime, but the nations of the earth, including long-standing allies of Israel like America, turning against Israel. And what's interesting is the right itself, which is something I didn't think I would see happen in my lifetime, along with the left, is being pulled in this anti-Israel direction. Here's one of the great propagandists of our time that I think Satan is using to accomplish this, Tucker Carlson. Notice what Tucker Carlson says here as he's comparing Qatar or Qatar with Israel. And by the way, Tucker Carlson just bought property, did he not? House probably is busy measuring the drapes, as we like to say, with his new home in Qatar. He tweeted out recently on X, compare Israel to, say, Qatar. And you decide for yourself what you think might be more useful for the United States to have, maybe even as a chief ally. You should go to Qatar, wander around for a day or two. You can fly in the world's greatest airline, by the way, as you get there, which has Starlink the entire way. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about related to Qatar. Good food, nice people, but just go there. Don't take our word for it. If you're being told that, Qatar is this hellscape with slave markets and, women in burqas or whatever, spend a weekend there and see for yourself. He says you're not encouraged to do that. You're never encouraged to see anything yourself. He says, don't do your own research is what we're told. Trust the science, trust our view, trust the 2-minute clip we put on X. And if you don't agree with that, then you're obviously an Islamist, a Nazi, a racist, whatever. We're going to attack your character, but for once, see it for yourself. And then there's a link there where you can watch this whole monologue, for yourself. I call it a propaganda-a-log. And basically what he's saying is, Qatar is way more safe than Israel. And rather than Israel being a chief ally of the United States, it ought to be Qatar. And I just have one simple question to ask propagandist Tucker Carlson, as he is sometimes called. If I, as a pastor, wanted to go start a church in Qatar, could I do that? I don't think so. Let's say I wanted to start, I'm a Bible church pastor, the first Bible church of Qatar. I mean, how long do you think I would last trying to do that? And yet you go to the nation of Israel today and there are actual Christian churches there. There's actually a church, a Christian church of Jerusalem, kind of like what we see started in the book of Acts. There it is. I happen to have met the pastor. I think his name, and maybe he's passed the baton on to others, but at the time it was Menno Kalasher. Great man, great ministry, freedom of religion there in the city of Jerusalem in the nation of Israel. I know other Christians that are freely allowed to practice their Messianic Judaism, their Christianity within the nation of Israel. I guarantee you no such right exists of any sort in Qatar. And so what Carlson, probably from his new home in Qatar, and who knows whoever paid for that or made the arrangements for that, I have my suspicions, making this proclamation that, Qatar is really the place of freedom of religion, not Israel. And I hope people can see that for the propaganda that it is. By the way, I found this on X. This was very interesting. This is somebody who kind of did a search, if you will, of all of Tucker Carlson's recent podcasts and posts and writings. And this is what they concluded. In 2005, from January 1st to December 14th, Tucker Carlson has posted 0 times on X expressing concerns about radical Islam, Islamic extremism, or related terms like jihad, Sharia, Islamist, or Muslim threats. Searches for these keywords in his posts returned no results. In contrast, he has frequently posted about Israel, often critically focusing on topics like the Gaza conflict, alleged war crimes, U.S. foreign policy, alignment with Israel, persecution of Christians in the region, the influence of the Israel lobby like AIPAC, and accusations of warmongering by pro-Israel figures. Examples include multiple video interviews and posts questioning U.S. support for Israel's actions in Gaza, criticizing evangelical leaders for ignoring treatment of Christians under Israeli policies, highlighting the power of pro-Israel voices in U.S. politics. Broad searches captured over a dozen such posts this year, while targeted ones for Israel alone returned several direct hits. Overall, Tucker Carlson has shown far more frequent concern, exclusively based on available posts, by the way, about Israel-related issues than about radical Islam in 2025, with the latter appearing not at all in his X activities. So what do you do with a guy like Tucker Carlson? I think he has a very bad case of IDS, Israel derangement syndrome. Of course, we talk about TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. Why don't we start talking about IDS, Israel on the brain derangement syndrome? And he's actually gone so far as to call Zionists as those having a, quote, brain cancer or brain disease of some kind, close quote, when in reality, he's like a ravenous, slobbering dog, an animal when it comes to this issue of Israel. It's something that he has the inability to let go of. I mean, Israel is the source of all of the problems in the Middle East and the world. Not a single word about who's actually blowing things up and promoting terrorism throughout the world, fundamentalist or what we might call consistent Islam. And so Tucker Carlson is a satanic mouthpiece, and he's being used to pull many in the MAGA movement into where the left already is, an anti-Israel mentality. And one of the people that is calling him out on this subject is a guy named Mike Evans, I believe is his name. And here is an article concerning him. This comes from the Jewish News Syndicate. This is a December 7th, 2025 article. It says, quote, or quoting the title, Tucker Carlson has no moral compass. Evangelical leader tells pastors in Shiloh. Mike Evans also, listen to this, chides the U.S. vice president for opposing Israeli annexation of Judea and Samaria. So here's a guy standing up and telling the truth. His name is Mike Evans. I don't know everything this man says, thinks, or believes, or has ever taught, but boy, he's sure right on this subject. Here's what the article says. The remarks by Mike Evans, founder of Jerusalem's Friends of Zion Museum, in an address to hundreds of American pastors touring the biblical heartland, highlighted the pushback Carlson is receiving among Bible-believing evangelicals for his criticism of U.S. support for the Jewish state and his rhetoric that has been widely condemned as anti-Semitic. You are listening to someone who does not represent us, Mr. Vice President, Evans said in an address to 1,000 visiting American pastors and educators in Shiloh, directing his speech to U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, who at the time was not in Israel. Continuing his address at the site of the ancient tabernacle in the particular region of Samaria, Evans said that Carlson, quote, is not our friend. He is not a friend of the state of Israel. He is undermining everything President Donald Trump stands for. He is a guided missile with no moral compass. He will fracture the Republican Party, and he will cause the president to lose the midterms, close quote. In his remarks in Shiloh. Now, where is Shiloh? Shiloh, you might remember, is where the tabernacle was lodged or stayed for a total of 369 years. sort of in between the conquest and the finally building of the temple under King Solomon in 966 BC. In his remarks in Shiloh, Evans gently chided the U.S. vice president for opposing Israeli annexation of Judea and Samaria. Vance said during a visit to Israel on October 23rd that the policy of the Trump administration is that the biblical heartland will not be annexed by Israel. Now, did you know that? Did you know that the policy of the Trump administration is not to allow the Israelis to annex Judea and Samaria? I don't remember Donald Trump running on that. I don't think he ran on that the first time he ran. I don't think he ran on that when he was seemingly defeated in 2020. I don't think he ran on it as he was reelected a second time. So it's kind of interesting how this is news to me. I didn't know the Trump administration was going to go in this direction. And by the way, this whole idea that Israel can't annex Judea and Samaria is a non-starter because you can't annex something that's already yours. That's like me, wanting to build a jacuzzi on my back porch and the neighbors getting upset at me for doing so. Well, I can do whatever I want on my own property. So when they say Israel can't annex Judea and Samaria, they're using a statement that doesn't make any logical sense and it doesn't make any legal sense as well. Quoting Evans, "Mr. Vice President, we love you and we love America, but you're wrong. Here's what you must understand. The policy of God who birthed America, the policy of God who gave this land to these people, is that Judea and Samaria are Bible land," close quote. This is biblical territory. This is where the history of the Bible unfolded. This is where Shiloh, where the ark was present for 369 years, transpired. I mean, this isn't territory that belongs to Qatar or the United States of America or anybody else. It belongs to the Jewish people according to Scripture. And any politician, Republican or Democrat, that denies that, as apparently J.D. Vance and the Trump administration itself and Tucker Carlson are doing, dividing the right, any group that does that is just flat out wrong. And so Michael Evans, outstanding what he's saying here. The evangelical leader from the Lone Star State continued, and here's how the article concludes, quote, "Texas, in 120 times the size of Judea and Samaria, we annexed Texas. Why? We called it manifest destiny. We did the same thing with Hawaii, manifest destiny." And what he is saying here is in the same way the nation of Israel owns Judea and Samaria. The territory that's being disputed here, we can put our first map up, is flippantly called the West Bank. That's the whole name of the game in the international world. If we can put up the second map, as Mike Evans is saying here in this speech, it's better named Judea and Samaria. And what Michael Evans is saying to these pastors assembled at this speech given in Shiloh is Tucker Carlson is wrong. The Trump administration is wrong. J.D. Vance is wrong. That territory belongs to the nation of Israel. And my point in bringing this up is look at how we're not talking about the left. Look at how the right has to reemphasize this, because the coalition on the right, the MAGA movement itself, is being divided on this very issue. And it shows you the time period that we're living in, where even the conservative base of the president, so-called, and I put conservative in quotation marks, is being pulled and pressured in an anti-Israel direction. The guy that has this whole thing right is Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. Notice this article here from Israel Today. This is December 12th, 2025. It says, the Bible is clear. Judea and Samaria belong to Israel, insists U.S. House Speaker. The article reads as follows. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, who visited the region both as a congressman and again in 2023, as Speaker told the Samaria Regional Council, headed by someone named Yossi Dagan during his visit to Washington, quote, the Bible is clear. Judea and Samaria are the land of Israel. I don't understand why we debate this anew every single day, close quote. Johnson's remarks came during a high-profile week that included a landmark hearing of the House of Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on the Middle East titled Understanding Judea and Samaria, Historical, Strategic, and Political Dynamics in U.S. Relations was the name of this hearing. It marked the first time the U.S. Congress formally used the region's accurate historical name. Dagan presented the speaker with copper artwork featuring ancient biblical sites such as Joseph's tomb in Shechem, Mount Gerizim, and the ancient capital of Samaria, understanding the spiritual and historical depth of the Jewish connection to the region. Quoting Dagan, no nation on earth has a connection to its homeland as deep as the Jewish people have to the land of Israel, especially to Judea and Samaria, the land of the Bible, Dagan told Johnson. There is no greater justice than fulfilling the words of the prophets in the land of Israel. At the congressional hearing, legal scholar Eugene, and I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing this last name. I believe it's pronounced Kontorovich. We'll just call him Eugene K. for short, if that's okay with you, of George Mason University invoked the international principle, and it gives here the principle in Latin, explaining that since the pre-state entity of mandatory Palestine included Judea and Samaria, Israel inherited a legal claim to it upon independence. Quoting this legal scholar, quote, Judea and Samaria are not some ambiguous no man's land. They are the rightful inheritance of the Jewish people, both biblically and legally, the scholar emphasized. The term West Bank, imposed by Jordan during its occupation from 1948 to 1967, has long been challenged by Israelis and others who point to the region's centrality in Jewish history and scripture. Even as the hearing touched on the political complexities surrounding annexation and Palestinian statehood, the tone of the day signaled a tectonic shift, a growing recognition in Washington that the Jewish presence in Judea and Samaria is not only a matter of modern politics, but of historical justice. One truth stood out clearly. For the first time, Congress is seriously grappling with the foundational question of who the land belongs to and why. Quote, 2,000 years ago, the prophets Jeremiah, Amos, and Ezekiel foretold that the people of Israel would return to their land and rebuild the hills of Samaria, plant vineyards, and produce wine, close quote, Dagan said. Continuing with Dagan, this is exactly where we are today, close quote. As of early 2025, over 500,000 Jews live in Judea and Samaria. Nearly 70% of Israelis extending full sovereignty over the region. In Speaker Johnson, they have found a rare and powerful American voice echoing the convictions of Scripture that the Jewish people are not occupiers in their own land, but its rightful heirs. So, if anybody understands this issue, it's Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. That's why all of this talk about, the Republicans are going to lose the House this time around, that makes me very, very nervous because this perspective will become a minority opinion should that occur. My hope and prayer is that the Republicans hold the House so that this proper understanding of who owns the land, who owns Judea and Samaria will continue. Because apparently Speaker of the House Mike Johnson gets it. J.D. Vance doesn't. Tucker Carlson doesn't. The Trump administration at large doesn't get it. But thank God that Speaker of the House Mike Johnson gets it. And let's not forget that God promises to curse those who curse his chosen people. Genesis 12, verse 3. And God promises to bring judgment upon the earth because the inhabitants of the earth divided his land. Joel chapter 3, verse 2. And I thank God that we have a restraining voice of this madness in Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. So if this issue is clear and there is a biblical and legal right for the Jewish people to enjoy, own, and possess the land that they're currently on, including Judea and Samaria, then why is it that the right, particularly the Trump administration, particularly J.D. Vance, seems to be being pulled the opposite direction? Well, the answer has to do with the art of the deal. Hey, we've got to get these Abraham Accords set up. I mean, after all, Trump says my legacy rides on it. So if that is going to happen and we're going to normalize relations and do all of these things that we want to do between the Saudis and the Gulf states and Morocco and the United Arab Emirates and Israel, then they're not going to play ball, these Gulf states that are Islamic, unless they get something in return. And one of the things they want in return is a divided Israel, which is what Islam calls for. As far as Islam is concerned, the Jewish presence on the land is looked at as a disrespecter to Allah, because everywhere Islam once ruled, if it's occupied by someone else, that's a disrespecter of Allah. Jerusalem is one of their holy sites, allegedly, where Muhammad ascended back to Allah on a steed named Barak. So as long as we're in bed with these Gulf states, trying to push through the Abraham Accords, you can expect the Trump administration to try to throw them a bone. And one of the bones he's trying to throw their direction is a divided Israel. And I'm just trying to give you the explanation as to why the nations of the world, including long-standing allies of the United States, long-standing allies of Israel, rather, like the United States, are sort of going wobbly on this issue. So notice this particular opinion piece. This one is a December 17th opinion piece. This one comes from the Jerusalem Post. And this particular writer says the U.S. must push Palestinians with sanctions, ostracizations, instead of coddling. Stop coddling the Palestinians is what this opinion piece, this writer calls for recently, December the 17th, in the Jerusalem Post. She writes this: Trump's deal of the century, unveiled in 2020, offered Palestinians a demilitarized state on roughly 70% of the West Bank with fragmented territory connected by corridors. Gaza would gain humanitarian aid, infrastructure like a port and airport on an artificial island, and a West Bank tunnel link. A $50 billion investment package promised economic growth in tourism, tech, and agriculture. East Jerusalem's suburbs would serve as the capital with refugee compensation, but no right of return to Israel. The Palestinians, listen to this, did not accept the offer. Supporting terrorism after committing to prevent it should have been enough to demonstrate to Trump that the Palestinians aren't serious about peace and ending the conflict. Yet Trump is still trying to work with the Palestinian Authority head, Abbas, and the Palestinians to work out a deal. Instead of declaring the Palestinians and the PA a sponsor of terrorism, America has continuously legitimized it as an institution capable of governing the Palestinian people. After the Trump administration revealed the Palestinian Authority had misled the American government and continued to pay families of terrorists and its pay-to-slay program after committing to stop, the Trump administration planned to designate Abbas, his deputy Hussein al-Sheikh, PA Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa, then PA Finance Minister Omar Bitter, and senior PLO official Ahmad, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce that last name, I'll just call him Ahmad M., as especially designated global terrorists. These sanctions would have significantly reduced the PA's ability to operate, since foreign governments would risk exposing themselves to secondary sanctions from America. After being threatened with American sanctions, Abbas fired Bitar, claiming he signed off on payments without Abbas's knowledge. Reports suggested that while figures in the State Department had pushed for sanctions, they were overruled by the White House, which felt that such an aggressive move risked antagonizing the Palestinians. And here's what the writer of this opinion piece says. Here is her central point. It's time America stopped coddling the Palestinians out of fear that they will be upset at America's actions. Until Palestinians, and especially the Palestinian leadership, face sanctions and ostracization by the international community, they will continue to lie and tell the Western world what they want to hear, all while supporting terrorism. An end to the conflict will continue to be impeded by Palestinian intransit. Here we go. Isn't it interesting that when I need to pronounce these words, my mouth just clamps up? Palestinian intransigence, there we go, until serious actions against them demonstrate that reform is their only path to survival. End of article. And what she's saying here is, look, the Palestinian Authority has been taking advantage of Western naivety for a long time. They've been going back on their word. They're clearly taking advantage of the naivety in the Trump administration. And this is why Israel is being sucked into all these bad deals. The Trump administration, and I'm no big Democrat, as you all know. I mean, I'm lifelong conservative, lifelong Republican. I voted for Trump 3 times. I generally appreciate many of the things that Donald Trump has done. But on this issue, I think he's a bit confused. As long as they're trying to pacify these people and satisfy these people, because they're trying to put together the Abraham Accords and all of these things that he thinks he needs for his legacy, they're going to keep demanding that Israel and her size shrink. They're going to keep demanding that the land of Israel be divided. And that's why the Trump administration, although Trump has done some great things for Israel, I mean, he moved our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in his first term. He recognized Israeli annexation of the Golan Heights in his first term. Well, now we're discovering that it's the policy of the Trump administration. It's the policy of J.D. Vance. It's part of the propaganda of Tucker Carlson that all of a sudden Israel can't annex the West Bank. And I'm trying to give you an explanation as to why this is now happening. The Trump administration is trying to make the Palestinian Authority happy so they'll stay at the deal level negotiating table. And he's got to throw bones their direction, which don't always favor Israel, to keep them happy. And just like Zechariah predicted, the world, including nations that were once allies of the nation of Israel, are gradually turning against the Jewish nation. And we're living in this time of prophetic fulfillment. Let me show you some other ways that the Trump administration has sort of kind of been coming down on the nation of Israel as of late. Notice this particular article from the Jerusalem Post. This one dated December the 11th, 2025, and it says Israel agrees to fund Gaza reconstruction for the time being at U.S. demand. And notice this, it says Israel has agreed to fund the reconstruction of Gaza for the time being in response to mounting pressure from the United States. Ynet reported on Thursday, citing a senior diplomatic source. The U.S. has been reportedly pushing Israel to pay for repairing the destruction across Gaza caused by the past 2 years of fighting, according to Ynet, with the cost estimated to be in the billions. This follows the Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin, and a last name I can't pronounce, and I'm not going to try to pronounce, saying that Qatar would not write the check to rebuild Gaza at the Doha Forum earlier this week. So isn't this an interesting thing? Israel didn't cause October the 7th, 2023. Hamas coming from Gaza caused that. Israel just went in and tried to root out Hamas out of Gaza. And now what the world is saying is Qatar, who no doubt played a role in financing a lot of this terrorist activity. Qatar doesn't have to pay the bill. They don't have to pay a single cent to rebuild Gaza. The Israelis need to pay for the whole thing based on destruction from something that they didn't originally create. And who's putting the pressure on Israel to do this? The United States of America. Why would the Trump administration do this? They're trying to keep this Abraham Accords coalition happy. And you can't do that unless you throw a bone or two in the direction of Qatar. It's just more of the same. This is why we're discovering that all of a sudden it's the policy of the Trump administration that the Israelis can't annex Judea and Samaria. Here's another example where the United States is following this pattern of, in a certain sense, turning on the nation of Israel. This particular article comes from the Jerusalem Post, and it says Trump is looking into whether Israel violated a ceasefire by killing a Hamas leader. And look at what it says here. Earlier, 2 American sources told Axios that the White House had sent a message to Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu expressing, listen to this, Washington's anger over the assassination of senior Hamas official Saad Ra'ad, which it described as an Israeli violation of the Gaza ceasefire agreement. Saad, the former commander of Hamas's military wing and one of the architects of Hamas's October 7th attacks, was killed in an Israeli strike over the weekend. So here are the Israelis very successfully taking out a mastermind terrorist. And rather than the Trump administration, celebrating the victory, instead what they do is they scold the nation of Israel with anger. Hey, you might be violating some kind of nebulous ceasefire. Why would the Trump administration do that? They're doing that because they're trying to keep Qatar and these other Gulf states happy. So part of their legacy could be these Abraham Accords. And so there is a political deal-making scenario in place which is dragging every nation, including longstanding allies of Israel like the United States, into a coalition against Israel. Even pro-Israel presidents like Donald Trump seem to be dragged into this coalition. And this is the kind of thing that Zechariah predicted related to the end of the age. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move to our third and final bullet point for today, and this has to do with the Gog-Magog alignment. I did write a book on the topic called The Middle East Meltdown. I'm going to make some points that Cush is the Sudan in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Meshach, Tubal, and Gomer and Togarmah are Turkey in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Persia is, or Iran, I should say, or Persia is Iran in Ezekiel 38 and 39. And when you see the name Rosh in Ezekiel 38 and 39, that refers to Russia. So Russia is Rosh, Iran is Persia. Turkey is Meshach, Tubal, Gomer, and Togarmah, and the Sudan is Cush. And you might be wondering, well, how in the world can you make that determination? Unfortunately, I don't have time to give you all the documentation in a short show like this, but it is available in a book I wrote called The Middle East Meltdown, The Coming Islamic Invasion of Israel. But here's a map of the whole thing. This is depicting Ezekiel 38 and 39, a coalition of nations which will come against the nation of Israel in the last days. You'll notice Rosh or Russia there up north. You'll notice as you look just beneath Russia, kind of in more of a southwestern direction, you'll see Meshach, Tubal, Gomer, and Togarmah, which represents Turkey. If you look over to the east, you'll see Persia or Iran involved, and as you look down south, you'll see Cush or the Sudan involved. And so what's interesting is all of these nations are in place for this conflict, and they are, as I'll show you in a minute, not just hostile towards Israel, but they are continually cooperating with each other, which you would expect on the eve of this sort of conflict, which will be fulfilled in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Notice this particular article. This one comes from Fox News, and this is a fascinating one. December 11th, 2025, it says, Israel unveils iron beam laser weapon while achieving a record of 15 billion with a B in arms sales. Let me read some of this article to you, and then I'll show you why this is prophetically significant. The article says a country the size of New Jersey is now the world's 8th largest arms exporter, with a record-breaking $15 billion in sales in 2024. Behind Britain, but ahead of Turkey and South Korea in foreign arms sales, governments are flocking to Israel to buy battle-tested weapons, especially rockets from its vaunted Iron Dome missile defense system. Listen to this. Even the Muslim-majority countries, Morocco, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. By the way, those are all countries that have entered into the Abraham Accords with Israel. Buy missiles, drones, and cybersecurity systems from the Jewish state. The record sales come as Israel unveils its latest weapon. The Iron Beam is capable of knocking out incoming missiles, mortar rounds, and drones up to 6 miles away. Listen to this, for as little as $2. Did you hear that? Not $200 or $2,000, $2 per interception. Here's how the article concludes, quoting one of the experts in this technology. The person says, the technology is already being shared with the U.S. Army's Directed Energy Program. Quoting the expert, we cannot do without the United States, he said, but sometimes it's a partnership where even the dwarf can contribute to the giant, close quote. Now, keep that in mind when you hear all of these voices say, yeah, let's not support Israel anymore. Let's not send any more money to Israel. Let's bash AIPAC at every chance we get. I mean, this is what Tucker Carlson routinely does. It's what Marjorie Taylor Greene does. I noticed that she's not running. Her seat is now open. I find it interesting that people that come against Israel publicly the way that she has, it's kind of interesting to me how they move from great popularity to something where their career is ended prematurely. And it looks like she's going to be some kind of voice, all things being equal, on MSNBC or CNN. I mean, God knows what's going to happen to her. Maybe she'll end up on The View. But it is interesting how people, when they come out aggressively against Israel, as she has done, blaming Israel for starving the inhabitants of Gaza, blaming Israel for committing genocide in Gaza, regurgitating Hamas statistics and talking points. It's interesting how their careers, have a tendency to find them on the ash heap of history. And that's a warning for any administration, including the Trump administration. And I specifically say this to J.D. Vance, because if you have any hope of obtaining the presidency one day, then you need to start thinking more clearly about the nation of Israel. But why do we say we're not going to chop Israel off at the knees? A lot of people think, gosh, if you support Israel, you're not MAGA. You're not America first, you're Israel first. Well, first of all, biblically, God says if you bless Israel, God will bless you. It's not that Israel needs America, but America actually needs Israel. If that prophecy is true and history has borne out its veracity. And let's put the Bible aside for a minute. Look at what Israel gives us. Look at this technology that is now available to us because we are an ally of Israel. And that's why the progenitor of this technology says we cannot, as Israelis, do without the United States, but sometimes in a partnership, even the dwarf can contribute to the giant. So they're helping us out in terms of this new technology, weaponry, this iron beam laser weapon, which is able to knock down incoming missiles 6 miles away, intercept them at $2 per interception. I mean, this is amazing technology. Israel shares it with its allies. And so from that standpoint alone, I think it's wise that we keep Israel as an ally. But this all is a precursor to Gog-Magog, and it's the fulfillment of Ezekiel 37, verses 7 through 11. Do you remember that passage? Ezekiel 37, verses 7 through 11 says, "So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I prophesied, there was a noise, and behold, a rattling, and the bones came together, bone to bone. And I looked, and behold, sinews were on them, and flesh grew, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, prophesy to the breath, prophesy, son of man, and say to the breath, thus says the Lord, come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe on these slain that they come to life. So I prophesied as he commanded, and the breath came into them, and the breath came into them, and life stood on their feet. Look at this next sentence or clause here or phrase, an exceedingly great army. Verse 11, then he said to me, son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones are dried up and our hope has perished and we are completely cut off. This is an amazing prophecy. It's a prophecy about the nation of Israel coming back into its land in unbelief. And then Ezekiel is told to prophesy a second time. And when he prophesies a second time, then the breath, the Hebrew there is ruah, where we get the word spirit, as in Holy Spirit, will come into the nation of Israel. So we are living in between those two prophecies. We've seen the bones and the muscles over the bones come together. And we're now waiting for the breath to enter the body. And so we're living in a time period of prophetic fulfillment. And so Israel has been regathered in unbelief. She has become wealthy, as Ezekiel 38, verses 12 and 13 indicates. That will be the motivation for the attackers that are coming, as predicted in Ezekiel 38 and 39. And in addition to all of these things, what does the prophecy say? Going back to Ezekiel 37 and verse 10, she will become an exceedingly great army. Isn't that what we've been reading about in this latest article that I brought to your attention? Israel has become about the size of New Jersey, a military powerhouse. Back to the title of that article, Israel unveils an iron beam laser weapon while achieving a record of $15 billion in arms sales. That is a fulfillment of Ezekiel 37 and verse 10. It's one of the many things that God predicted would happen concerning the nation of Israel at the end of the age. Now, that can't be a prophecy about the millennial kingdom, as some would say, because there won't be a need for an army during the days of the millennial kingdom, because they will, according to Isaiah 2, Isaiah 11, Isaiah 65, they will beat their swords into plowshares. Peace will break out all over the world. The nations will not study nor learn of war anymore. So when do you need an army? You need an army when you're surrounded by people that want to attack you. And as that scenario starts to develop, one of the things that God predicts, in addition to Israel back in the land and becoming wealthy, is she will become this powerful army. And so this is all setting the stage for Ezekiel 38 and 39. I believe it's actually a prophetic fulfillment of Ezekiel 37 and verse 10. And this coalition against Israel is developing. Remember, Persia is Iran in Ezekiel 38 and 39. And notice this article from the nationalnews.com. This is dated December the 5th, 2025. It says, troublemaker Israel is a greater regional threat than Iran, says Prince Turki al-Faisal, if I'm pronouncing that right. Faisal. It says in this article, it is Israel and not Iran that poses the greater threat to regional stability. Saudi former diplomat Prince Turki al-Faisal told Milken Institute's Middle East and Africa Summit. So in my view, it's definitely Israel that is the troublemaker and should be reined in by the United States, the prince told an audience at Abu Dhabi. The Israel strike, which targeted Hamas negotiators in Doha as they studied the Gaza ceasefire proposal, was a warning sign that showed the GCC must unite to defend itself, Prince Turki said. So look at how these surrounding nations are now looking at the nation of Israel. They're a bigger threat than Iran, which to me is absolute crazy talk, because Iran is the number one state sponsor of terror around the world, but it's actually Israel that's the troublemaker. And you know what? The United States needs to get involved in this and help us. And what is happening is the nations are turning against Israel in general, like Zechariah predicted, and the tiny specific nations, whether you're talking about Iran itself, Turkey, etc., are now in place with an attitude of hostility towards the nation of Israel, routinely spewing mindless propaganda that somehow Israel is some kind of bigger threat on the world stage in the region than Iran, the number one state sponsor of terror. Now, you might remember in a prior pastor's point of view, we talked about the Oxford University Debating Society, where the future leaders of the UK come from, the best and the brightest of the students, and they reached the same conclusion, that Israel is a bigger threat to the region than is Iran, the number one state sponsor of terror around the world. Have you ever heard such crazy talk? Have you ever heard such lunacy and insanity? And yet, Zechariah said this day would come. The nations, as they coalesce around Israel, would be in a state of drunkenness. Zechariah 12, Zechariah 14 predicts they'd be without their rational faculties. And we're living in a time period where we can see that scenario develop. Let me bring one more issue to your attention related to this Gog-Magog coalition. In the map we had up earlier, remember that we made reference to Rosh or Russia and the Sudan. The Sudan and Russia will play a role, according to Ezekiel 38 and 39, of coming against Israel in the last days. Now, if that is true, then those two powers, those two regions must start to cooperate with each other. So with all of that being said, let me take you to this X post from someone named Mario Nafal. And he titles this post as follows: Putin of Russia sinks his teeth into Africa. Why Russia wants a naval base in the Sudan. So let's read a few sentences from this X post if we could. Sudan's military regime has offered Moscow, listen to this, its first naval base in Africa, a 25-year deal that would give Russia direct access to the Red Sea and critical global trade routes. The base in Port Sudan would allow Russia to dock nuclear-powered warships, host up to 300 troops, and project power from the Suez Canal to the Indian Ocean. In return, Sudan's isolated generals get advanced Russian weapons to fuel their civil war, and Moscow gets a geopolitical prize that it's chased for years. This isn't just about ships. It's about Putin carving out new influence in Africa after Wagner's collapse and Western pressure in Ukraine. I hope when you read a post like this, you can see Ezekiel 38 and 39 in this. One of the arguments that I've heard for a long time is, we're a long way from the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38 and 39 because there's no presence of Russia or Rosh in North Africa. Well, think again. Now there is a presence of Russia or Rosh in North Africa, and not just North Africa in general, but Sudan, the Sudan. So before these nations invade Israel, it's completely logical to conclude that they would be kind of in an alliance, some kind of symbiotic relationship with each other. Did you ever think the day would come when Russia and Sudan would be in cahoots? And that's exactly what this X post is revealing. And so whether we're talking about the nations of the earth saying Israel is worse than Iran, whether we're talking about the fulfillment of a prophecy of a giant effective army taking place in the land of Israel, or whether we are talking about an alliance between North Africa and Russia, with issue after issue after issue, the stage is being set for the scenario that the Bible predicts for the end of the age. We're living in astronomical times. So in this particular prophecy update, looking at our review slide, we covered 3 issues. The world versus Israel was number 2, but first was anti-Semitism. And then we took a look at the Gog-Magog coalition. We always like to end our broadcast with a note of optimism. Notice Titus 2:13, which says, looking for the blessed hope and the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. There's hope in this. Go from bad. The wrath of God is poured out on planet Earth. There is a promise that Jesus is going to come in the rapture and take his own to be with him forever. And I hope this Christmas season that your hope rests exclusively in Jesus Christ for your salvation and the safekeeping of your soul. If it does, then this promise applies to you. And if you're unclear about it, you can place your trust in Christ now, even as I am speaking. A few infomercials as we wrap up. Enjoy Andy Wood's ministries in podcast format. Enjoy all of our content that we put out through Andy Wood's ministries in our free downloadable app available in the App Store. Enjoy all of our content from Andy Wood's ministries at our website, andywoodsministries.org. And while you're there, there's a conspicuous way on the homepage to sign up for our newsletter, where the show notes that I read from will show up in your inbox for free every Friday morning. Take advantage of our new AI search tool at Ask Andy, and you can find this on our website. You can find this on our, app. Type in your question to the question box. It does a quick search of my sermons and will give you the answer that you are looking for. If you're interested in seminary training, I'm the president of a school called Chafer Theological Seminary. Check it out at chafer.edu. Great time to check it out because we just rolled out our spring course schedule. Sign up for a course or two this semester and grow in your knowledge of theology and the Word of God. While you're there, download a copy of our latest journal that we have produced called Pneumatikos. And moving into some of the conferences we're going to be doing in 2026, of course, the big push now is our ProfCon 2026, February 20th and 21st. Look at those speakers. And what a great time of fellowship and worship as we focus on last days discernment. We've moved this over to the Sugarland Marriott to accommodate more people. That's just going to be a tremendous all-day Friday event, culminating in a banquet that Friday evening, all day Saturday. And we invite you to stick around and come to church, where our conference speakers will be presenting during our normal Sunday school and service times at Sugarland Bible Church. Go to profcon.com to learn all about it. Speaking of Chafer Seminary, don't forget our Chafer Theological Seminary conference that's coming up. This is going to be March 2nd through 4th at nearby West Houston Bible Church. The subject is spiritual warfare. You're not going to want to miss that. And if you're looking for a conference in the Pacific Northwest, check out the Stealing the Mind put on by Compass Ministries, a tremendous one-day, all-day Saturday event, March the 14th, 2026. Maybe you're looking for a conference on the East Coast. Check out the conference put on by comingsoonministries.org, August 1st, 2026. And maybe you want to kind of get out of the four corners of the building, so to speak, and tour Bible lands. My wife and I, along with Bill and Susie Perkins, will be leading a cruise / Bible Lands expedition Notice this 5-star ship, 9-day cruise, 3 countries, 5 days in Israel. In fact, that might even be incorrect. I think an additional day was added. And a lot of people have wanted to sign up for this and said, I can't, it's sold out. Well, guess what? We just added a 3rd bus. So there's, as the saying goes, room at the cross for you. And so I invite you to sign up for that. I'll be doing live teaching at these various sites and on the ship as well, as will Bill Perkins. And then my book, The Bible in Your Vote, has been out. It'll teach you how to vote not based on party lines, but based on the Bible. That's all I've got for today. Thank you for watching Pastor's Point of View. Thank you for listening to Pastor's Point of View. Thank you for sharing Pastor's Point of View. And we will see you next time, Lord willing, right here on Pastor's Point of View. God bless you.